Episode 17. Find Her. Ugh! The sudden, intense pain caused Bryce's handsome face to twist slightly. Natalie sucked in a breath of cold air and pushed. This time, she easily got away. "Sorry, Bryce." With these words, she ran away. About 10 seconds later, after he had finally recovered from the pain, Bryce sat up on the bed. His dark eyes were now frighteningly black. That damned woman. He must catch her and make her pay for what she'd done. He squinted his eyes, thinking. If he was not mistaken, she was wearing the uniform of a hotel attendant. With this in mind, he got up, walked to the door, and opened it. The moment the bodyguards outside saw him, they lowered their heads respectfully. "Mr. Clare, did you see the woman who just ran out?" The bodyguards looked at each other and replied in unison, "Yes, very good." He narrowed his eyes and said fiercely, "Go and get her for me." Natalie ran out of the room and down the stairs. But after descending a few floors, she couldn't run anymore and had to stop. It should be safe now, right? She raised her head and looked up the stairs. Thinking about what had just happened left her with a lingering fear. She had kicked him. Oh, he must seriously hate her. She only hoped she would never see him again. After taking a few deep breaths and calming herself down, she walked out of the stairwell. Suddenly, she bumped into Susan, who had been showing her around the hotel. When the girl saw her, she frowned and asked with some displeasure, "Why were you in the bathroom so long?" Natalie's gaze drifted away for a moment, and then she smiled bashfully. "This hotel is so big, I got lost. I've been looking for a long time, but I couldn't find you. I'm really sorry." Seeing that her apology was sincere, Susan said cautiously, "It's best if you don't wander around. If you offend an important guest, that would be bad, especially the guests in the presidential suite. Even the manager has to be careful when he sees them." The corner of Natalie's mouth twitched. Susan's advice had come too late. "Let's go. I'll help you learn your way around the hotel so you won't get lost again," she said kindly. At this, Natalie came to her senses and responded with a small smile. She turned around and looked in the direction of the staircase with a serious expression on her elegant face. Although she hadn't found Liam this time, she had angered Bryce. But it didn't matter. At least she had managed to get a hint of where Liam might be held captive. Tomorrow, when she came back to work, she would find a chance to go up there. She would do everything she could to get him back. Susan walked for a while and then realized that Natalie was not following her. She turned around, and seeing that she was still standing there, she shouted, "Natalie, what are you doing?" Natalie pulled herself from her thoughts and ran to catch up with her. Bryce's bodyguards quickly discovered Natalie's identity. "Mr. Clare, that woman is a new employee at the hotel." New employee? He frowned. Had he really misunderstood her intentions? At that moment, the sound of something falling came from the room next door, interrupting his thoughts. He had always been a quiet man, and he didn't like noise. But the racket from the next room didn't sound like it was going to end. Ugh, how irritating. Bryce squinted in annoyance, then said in a deep voice, "Go see what's going on." "Yes." The bodyguards left hurriedly. He went to the next room and knocked loudly on the door. After a while, the door opened just enough for the man inside to stick his head out. He looked at the bodyguard, then asked, "What's the matter?" At that moment, there was the sound of something falling again. The bodyguard frowned and said sternly, "What's going on in your room? Can't you be quiet? You've already irritated the people next door, causing a ruckus." The man smiled awkwardly. "Sorry, it's a child making a fuss. Don't worry, I'll calm him down soon." "Well, hurry up." With that, the bodyguard turned around and was about to leave when a childish voice came from inside the room. "Let me out, you meanies! I hope my dad teaches you guys a lesson. My dad is awesome." The people next door were still being noisy, and Bryce was very impatient. So eventually, he came out personally to see what was going on. When he got to the door, he heard a child's voice. Why did it sound so familiar? He quickly walked over to his bodyguards, and they respectfully lowered their heads. "Mr. Clare, what's going on?" "A child is throwing a tantrum." Bryce knocked on the door, and when the man opened it again, he said, "Who's in there?" Everyone in the room could feel Bryce's domineering aura. Frightened, the man threw out an, "It has nothing to do with you," and rushed to close the door. This filled Bryce with rage, and he raised his long leg and kicked the door open. The man was caught off guard and retreated a few steps. Another man in the room immediately rushed over. Seeing that he was about to hit their boss, Bryce's bodyguards quickly went up to him and blocked his path. The two sides stared at each other. The atmosphere was tense. "Why'd you do that? What do you want?" shouted the first man angrily. Bryce didn't even look at him as he walked into the room and scanned it with a cold gaze. Everything inside was smashed and scattered all over the floor. He raised his eyebrows and thought, what kind of child would do this? Then he saw a small figure standing on the sofa. Recognition danced in Bryce's eyes. He wanted to turn around and leave, but as soon as the child saw him, his clear eyes lit up and he cried out in joy, "Daddy!" Bryce knew there was no escape. Liam jumped off the sofa and ran toward him. He grabbed Bryce's leg, raised his cute, innocent face, and looked at him with bright eyes. "Dad, you're here to save me, right?" Bryce raised his hand and rubbed his throbbing forehead. The child's mother had just left, and now he had run into the child again. Was this a coincidence or bad luck? When he didn't say anything, Liam tilted his head in confusion. "Dad, what's wrong?" Bryce looked at him. Unlike his mother, this child was rather pleasing to look at. And he turned around and looked at the two men who were being blocked by his bodyguards, and his gaze darkened. That woman had said that Liam had been locked up, and it seemed that this was true. He didn't know why, but he felt displeased when he thought about Liam, who was so young, being locked up in here. So he bent over and picked the boy up. "Liam, tell me, what's going on?" Episode 18. He misunderstood her. Liam pouted pitifully. "My nasty auntie locked me up. She wouldn't let me see Mommy, and she told me to stay here. She also said that if I didn't listen, then these people would hurt me." He pointed at the two men who were guarding him and said hatefully, "That's them. They're the bad guys. Bad people, like my horrible auntie." Bryce frowned and looked at the men. When they met his cold gaze, they lowered their heads in fear. "But I wasn't scared, because I knew that my dad would come to save me." Liam hugged Bryce's neck. The child's soft, gentle voice filled his ears and touched his cold heart. The bodyguards didn't see him resist Liam's touch, but they could feel that their boss's usual aura had become warmer. They were dumbfounded. This was the first time they had seen him like this. "Why did your aunt lock you up?" Bryce asked. He remembered that the woman had said her child had been taken by her father, but she hadn't said why. He had only asked casually. He hadn't actually thought a child as young as Liam would be able to tell him anything, but the boy was smarter than he thought. "When you left the hospital, Grandpa had my horrible auntie take me away and lock me up so that I couldn't see Mommy. Auntie said that as long as they had me locked up, Mommy would do what Grandpa said." Liam let out a snort. "Auntie and Grandpa are both bad people. They bullied me and Mommy." Although he was small, his speech was clear and precise. After Bryce heard this, he was a bit shocked. What Tom had done was practically kidnapping, and he had actually done this to his own daughter and grandson. He didn't know how such a man could call himself a father. He also couldn't help but think about Natalie, who had barged into his room earlier. "I'm not lying. This was an accident. I thought Liam was here. I came to find him." Her explanation was true. Bryce felt a burst of annoyance. It seemed that he really had misunderstood her. But this had nothing to do with him. He looked down at Liam, who was in his arms. The boy gave him a sweet smile, his eyes twinkling. Bryce's heart softened, and a sigh escaped his lips as he held the child tightly and walked out of the room with big strides. Seeing that he was taking the child away, the two men panicked. They rushed forward to take him back, but they were stopped by Bryce's bodyguards. They could only watch with despair as Liam was carried away. Bryce carried the child into his room and put him down. Then he took out his cell phone and handed it to him. "Call your mother and ask her to come pick you up." Liam took the phone and stared at it for a while. Then he looked up innocently and said,
Dad, you're not taking Mommy and me home?
What a sweet question. Bryce suppressed the irritation in his heart and explained patiently, "Little guy, I'm not your dad, so you shouldn't call me that."
But you are.
Liam looked at him with determination. Bryce raised his eyebrows. "Sorry, you are not my son, so stop calling me daddy." With that, he got up to leave. Liam quickly grabbed his shirt.
Daddy!
Why was this child so stubborn? Bryce took a deep breath, pulled his hand away, then bent over. They stared at each other. "Listen carefully. I'm really not your father." Seeing how serious he was, Liam pouted in disappointment. Tears welled up in his eyes as he lowered his head pitifully and dialed Natalie's number. The call didn't connect. First, he had been rejected by Bryce, and now Natalie wasn't picking up her phone. He was even more disappointed now, and he cried out,
Daddy doesn't want me, and Mommy is gone too. I'm just a kid nobody likes.
Bryce was speechless. Seeing how pitifully Liam was crying, he started to feel bad. He scratched his head in frustration, but in the end, he just couldn't bear it anymore. He held back his temper and said, "Don't cry. Stay with me tonight. Your mom will come to pick you up tomorrow."
Really?
Liam immediately stopped crying and looked at him in surprise. Bryce had a feeling that something was wrong, but he ignored it and nodded impatiently. "Really?" Then he looked at the time and said, "It's getting late. Let's go to sleep." Liam agreed. He looked around and then reached out his hand to grab Bryce's shirt. "What now?" Bryce turned around and looked at him in annoyance. Because he had just been crying, Liam's eyes were glistening. He said shyly,
I haven't taken a bath yet. Daddy, can you give me a bath, please?
"What?" Bryce thought he was hallucinating. The boy wanted him to give him a bath. Liam could tell that he wanted to say no, but he didn't give up. He pretended to be disappointed. He lowered his head and whispered,
Dad has never been around my whole life. Other kids' dads give them a bath. I envy them.
This child. The veins on Bryce's forehead started to bulge. Liam sneaked a glance at him. Seeing that his expression wasn't good, he slowly turned around and said,
Forget it. If you don't want to, never mind.
As he spoke, he slowly made his way to the bathroom. His small figure looked heavy with loss. Damn it. Bryce strode forward, scooped him up in his long arms, and held him. Fine, I'll give you a bath if you want me to. Liam immediately wiped away his disappointment and put on a happy expression. Then he forcefully kissed Bryce on the cheek.
Dad, you're so nice.
Bryce felt cheated again. After taking a bath, Liam had no clothes to change into, so he put on Bryce's t-shirt. It was so big on his small body that it looked like he was wearing a long skirt. Bryce helped him dry his hair and then told him to lie down to sleep. Liam laid down, but he couldn't fall asleep. Bryce felt like he was about to explode, but he asked patiently, What's wrong? Liam answered,
Dad, will you sleep with me?
Sleep with you? Bryce decided that he would not give in this time. No, you have to sleep by yourself. Feeling rejected again, Liam's eyes immediately turned red. Bryce clenched his fist and took a deep breath. Then he came down and laid down beside him. Sleep. Liam beamed. He snuggled close to him and closed his eyes. What the hell? Bryce tilted his head and looked at Liam, sighing heavily. Why did he give in to this little boy so easily?